Hello, my name's Austin Steele. My midterm project is on William Shakespeare, probably the greatest English writer and playwright of all time. Biography on William Shakespeare. He was born in April of 1564 in Stratford upon Avon. Though the exact day of his birth is still under debate, most believe he was born on April the 23rd. He was the son of a public official, and during that time, public officials' children received free tuition to go to school, but there are no records of him ever attending school. But most scholars believe he attended the local grammar school where he got the basics of the English language, learned how to read, learned how to write. He lived his entire childhood in Stratford upon Avon. At the age of 18, though, when most scholars would go on to London or Cambridge to master the English language and learn to be a playwright and learn to be an author, he married his wife, Anne Hathaway, and they had three children together rather quickly in 3 years actually. The the first was Susanna, of course she was the oldest. Then they had twins, Hamnet and Judith. Kind of a tragic note is that Hamnet died at the age of 11 of unknown causes, which may have pushed him to write some of the tragedies that are so well known today. Most scholars believe that Shakespeare arrived in London in the mid 1580s, where he basically got work with anything and everything that he could. Though around 1592, he joined on with the acting company and began acting and writing. And there's some evidence that even shows that some of his early plays, I should say, may have been produced, but the evidence is still weak at best. But by the mid 1590s, he became one of the managers of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, which changed its name later to the King's Men when King Richard was crowned king. And then the final note is he and his managers had the Globe built in the late 1500s, maybe early 1600s, where all of his plays took place in, and it still stands today. Shakespeare's early work was that not really exciting, especially the history variant types of plays that he wrote. These titles include Richard II, Henry VI, and Henry V. Henry VI, though, had three parts. Again, these plays aren't very well known or studied because they're just kind of reiterations of those kings' lives. But then he wrote the comedies, and some are very well known, like Much Ado About Nothing, The Taming of the Shrew, and A Midsummer's Night Dream. The only exception, though, is he did write his first tragedy during this time, which was Romeo and Juliet, and we all know that Romeo and Juliet is one of his greatest plays. Then later on, he wrote the tragedies that we all know today, like Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, and King Lear. His final works, though, were that not of tragedies or comedies, they were a mixture of both, called tragic comedies. These include The Winter's Tale, The Tempest, and Cymbeline. The big difference, though, between the tragic comedies and the tragedies is that tragic comedies ended in the happily ever after kind of thing, where the characters showed remorse and forgiveness to one another, while in tragedies, we all know that kind of either everyone dies, the hero loses a respected loved one, or loses an entire family. Then he died in April of 1616. Some say he died on April the 23rd, while others believe that's just a myth. Include writing in a melodic iambic pentameter. An iambic pentameter is where each line has 10 syllables with alternating stresses. He also wrote in blank verse and free verse, and blank verse is of spoken language where there is no rhyming scheme, there is no really significant language tone in it. It's just basic, regular English, regular spoken language. Then, of course, he had his soliloquies, sonnets, and monologues where the characters would further their expansion of the play, show their ideas, and bring forth to the audience maybe some future plans that would occur during the play. He also had music in his plays to demonstrate a multitude of things. Shakespearean soliloquies are well known. There are some famous sayings that we still know today, like "to be or not to be," and what a piece of work a man is. Like again, like I said before, he used soliloquies to further expand characters' parts in the play, their ideas and future plans that they may do or may happen in the play. They used foreshadowing a lot to bring forth to the audience what is going to occur later on in the play. But the typical qualities of a Shakespearean soliloquy includes despair. This is very, very prominent in Macbeth's soliloquy, where he states that life has no meaning, and the only reason why he states this is that because he just lost his wife, and he also just learned that he became the king of Denmark. So it was ironic but tragic. These soliloquies are written in iambic pentameter and also written in blank verse. He also had his sonnets. He had over 154 sonnets where he wrote and were published. Some of the most well known is "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, and to me, fair friend, you can never be old." And the reasons why the titles are so long is because the sonnets had no titles. So to produce a title, they just took the first line of the sonnet and made it its title. The qualities of a Shakespearean sonnet, though, is that all the sonnets are 14 lines, they are of iambic pentameter, and they have a rhyming couplet at the end. But the true definition, according to the textbook, is a sonnet is a poem of 3 4-line stanzas and a final 2-line couplet. And they have a rhyming scheme of A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, and G G. And the rhyming scheme of that is the first line of every stanza would rhyme with the third line. But the final 2 lines would rhyme with one another. Again, like I said before, he used music heavily in his plays. He used music to show the audience character revelation, and what I mean by that is most of his characters sung songs throughout the play. And in these songs, he showed the audience the state of mind and what the character is thinking. He also used music to show changes in locale or scenery, and also time. He also used music to signify a character's entrance or exit. An example would be if a lord or a prince or a king would enter onto the stage, trumpets would blare, blaring a very royal tune. But Shakespeare used musical imagery in his plays through spoken voice to show the audience a wider picture and a better picture of what characters are going through. A prime example of that is in the play Romeo and Juliet. Romeo just left Juliet, and Juliet is sitting on the balcony crying and screaming out. The lark sings so out of tune, straining sharp discords and unpleasing sharps. But though Shakespeare was a great writer, he was no musical artist. So he had musical composers like Thomas Morley write and accompany songs and compositions throughout his play. But not everything was great for Shakespeare. There is a conspiracy that some scholars believe that he may not have even existed in history, that he may have just been a legend or a myth. Or scholars believe that since he did not have a lot of schooling, he couldn't have had the mastery of the English language that he showed throughout his plays. So scholars believe authors like Francis Bacon, Edward de Vere, and Christopher Marlowe wrote all of these plays that are so famous and just used a pen name of William Shakespeare to for the plays to be produced. There are arguments to both sides, and there are evidence for both sides, but most still believe that Shakespeare did exist and did write all of his plays. Shakespeare's plays are so well known and so captivating that some have even hit the Hollywood big screens. Plays like Romeo and Juliet were turned into movies, one being in the 60s and one being in the 90s, where it even starred Leonardo DiCaprio. And then the play Much Ado About Nothing was turned into the movies with great actors like Keanu Reeves and Denzel Washington. It just shows that even though Shakespeare has been long gone for over 500 years, we still see his plays so captivating that we can turn them into movies and they will still draw audiences for his qualities and his work throughout the plays. These are my citations. And the final note I want to put is that Shakespeare was so captivating, not only in the Renaissance time, he's still mainstream today, where Hollywood will still make movies about his plays, and it just shows that Shakespeare was well before his time, and he captivated audiences during some dark times, that of the Black Plague and plagues and disease, and it brought audiences and people closer, and it just shows that Shakespeare was not only a great writer, but like I said before, a man before his time.